Number 10. Deadly California Shooting. In July 2021, TikTok sensation Anthony Barajas was shot and killed while on a date with his girlfriend, Riley Goodrich. She too perished in the shooting, of which there was no obvious motive. It all started with one idea: let's go see a movie. According to Riley's dad, Anthony had only recently asked her on a date. It was actually their very first outing, and Riley's father said she seemed really happy before leaving the house. Plus, it was nice that the guy had over 1 million followers on TikTok. He was kind of a big deal. Everything went wrong when the lights went dark for the movie to start. Completely unprovoked and for no good reason, a 20-year-old guy named Joseph Jimenez walked into the movie theater where the young couple were having their date and opened fire. The first shot went straight through the back of Riley's head, killing her instantly. The second shot sealed Anthony's fate, with the bullet going through his eyeball and into his skull. Both of them literally had their brains blown out while trying to watch Forever Purge. And to make things even more horrifying, nobody else even noticed the shooting had happened. Their corpses weren't discovered until the movie was over, and employees went to clean the theater. Employees at the theater told local reporters that nobody on staff had even heard a gunshot. And even though the killer was arrested and is now being charged with murder, he hasn't given the police any motive for why he did it. It looks like he just got all worked up watching The Purge and pulled his gun out. Number 9. The wrong seat. A dispute over theater seats left one man dead during a showing of Spider-Man: No Way Home at a theater in Atlanta. Anyone who's been to a movie recently, or even in the last 5 years, knows about assigned seating. You buy your ticket, choose your seat, and there's no issues. When you go into the movie theater, there's no debate over whose seat is where. The number is literally right there on the ticket. In this AMC theater, a man was sitting in somebody else's seat. He knew he wasn't supposed to be sitting in the seat, and yet he sat in it anyway. This made the rightful ticket holder angry. The man with the ticket was so angry that he pulled out a gun and shot the guy sitting in his spot. The gunshot caused mass panic. Everyone started screaming and running out of the theater. The shooter also ran out of the theater in the wave of panic and has not yet been apprehended by the police. They described him as a man in a jacket and a hoodie, because that's really going to narrow it down. Thankfully, it looks like the victim survived. He was rushed to a nearby hospital in critical condition. This was back in December of 2021, and the shooter is still on the loose. Number 8. Busted. If you were to see a couple of teenagers making out in a theater, you probably wouldn't think too much about it. But when a fully grown couple decided to get frisky and go all the way at a Texas theater, the other moviegoers had some serious issues with it. People showed up to the San Antonio movie theater in 2017 to be entertained, but not like this. Melissa Feist McHouston and Adam Emmett Lee are facing charges of public lewdness. They were booked into the Bexar County Jail and then released on bond. These weren't teenagers. They were closer to being seniors than being teens. Here's what actually went down when the movie started. One employee noticed the couple getting a little too intimate. He went to go get his manager, and they returned together to find the couple getting busy like a couple of Energizer bunnies. The manager told him that it was a public space, and they needed to stop what they were doing. The woman climbed up her partner, and the two stood there in shock, not saying anything. It took an uncomfortably long time for them to put their clothes back on, and that was when the police came in and took them to the station. They probably thought they were going to have a bit of exhibitionist fun, but they just ended up in jail. Oops. Number 7. Assault during the Joker. At a screening of the movie Joker in 2019, a man became so worked up that he tried to beat the manager of the Cinemark with his fists. His name is Shane Christopher, and it all happened over a cell phone. The movie was starting, and the manager noticed that Christopher had his cell phone on. We've all seen that one guy playing with their phone even as the lights go out, and the movie starts. It's annoying, and the manager told the man to stop it. But Christopher was so angry that someone would even suggest he turn his phone off, that he stood up and shoved the manager backwards. The manager backed off, and Christopher stopped playing on his phone. Everything seemed okay, but shortly after, he was back on his phone, annoying everyone in the theater. The manager told him to turn it off again, and this time Christopher got up and slapped him in the head. The only way the manager could get Christopher out of the movie theater was by bringing in the security guard. But Christopher proved tough, slapping and grappling with them both. They needed help from two people in the auditorium just to drag Christopher outside, where the police put him in a squad car. When the cops asked him what his name was, he replied, "I'm the Joker." Have you ever gotten into a risky altercation because of somebody playing on their phone in a theater? Let us know about it in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Movie theater mayhem in Germany. In Germany, a gunman was shot to death by special police officers after he took hostages during a movie. It happened in June of 2016 in a small town near Frankfurt, when a man armed and masked walked into a cinema complex at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The cinema was showing Alice in Wonderland and The Jungle Book. The man was dressed in a balaclava, combat boots, an ammunition belt over one shoulder, and what appeared to be a rifle. As he entered the cinema, he started firing. But this was a pretty weird incident. He didn't actually manage to hit anybody with his bullets. He was just firing aimlessly. And then he rounded up a bunch of hostages, but didn't give any demands to the police. Within just 60 minutes, German officers stormed the theater, filled it with tear gas, and shot the guy to death. Nobody was even injured throughout the entire thing, and nobody ever figured out what his motive was. He just snapped one day, dressed up like Rambo, and walked into a theater. Number 5. Violent teenagers in Colorado. In Colorado, a mother was hospitalized after a night at the movies gone horribly wrong. It was September 2017, and she was at the Century 16 Belmont Theaters in Lakewood. She had gone to the theater with a couple of friends when a group of teens started getting out of control. The victim, Heather Piper, told them to settle down. They were crawling over the seats, screaming, and acting like a bunch of drunk hyenas. When she asked the group to be quiet, they ignored her or told her to mind her own business. Heather finally had to get a security guard involved to drag the teenagers out of the building. Everything was quiet, and everybody could finish the movie. Things were fine until the movie was over. When Heather and her friends left the theater, one of the teens came up and punched her in the side of the head. Rather than helping to defend Heather against the vicious teenager, her grown adult friends ran inside and screamed for help. Heather also didn't fight back because she didn't want to risk losing her foster parent license by beating up a teenager. The teen eventually ran away, and Heather was sent to the hospital. Heather suffered bruises, scratches, and had a fractured nose. She had blood from her face all the way down to her shoes, and yet, despite being attacked in broad daylight at a shopping center, Lakewood police have still not found the angry teenager. Number 4. A fight at the movies. A family in Arkansas is devastated due to an incident that happened at a movie theater in Little Rock in December of 2021. Their beloved family member, a man named Terrence Caffey, was left dead after getting into a brawl at a movie tavern. According to the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, one of the officers was contacted by management at the theater, claiming Terrence was assaulting their employees. When officers arrived, they witnessed Terrence and several of the employees in a physical altercation. As sheriffs were trying to arrest Terrence, something went wrong. The police haven't exactly said what happened, with the sheriffs simply saying Terrence went into medical distress. They were trying to arrest him. He was making things difficult, and some sort of medical distress left him not breathing. He was transported to a local hospital and pronounced dead. This was a weird night at the movies for everyone. We never did find out why Terrence was fighting with staff at the theater. We don't even know how he died. Even after 4 of the Arkansas deputies involved in the incident were put on administrative leave and then returned to work, the police still haven't given the public an answer. They say the investigation is ongoing, but that could mean it goes on forever. Number 3. Ambushed in her seat. At a movie theater in Texas, a woman was sent to the hospital after being ambushed and stabbed. This was in the summer of 2021. It happened at the Santikos Palladium Theater in San Antonio at around 11 o'clock at night. The woman was walking down the hallway between the different auditoriums. From out of nowhere, a man approached from behind, stabbed her with a bladed instrument several times, and then took off running down the hall. This was one of the most shocking, unprovoked attacks in recent memory. Imagine going to use the toilet after watching a long movie and walking back to the lobby when somebody stabs you from behind for no reason. That's what happened to this poor woman, who had no idea who stabbed her. There were no witnesses. The police were unable to track the suspect down, and she couldn't think of anyone who would try to assassinate her. Honestly, she's just lucky to still be alive. Number 2. Pasco County Shooting. In 2014, during a matinee showing of a movie in Pasco County, a man named Curtis Reeves shot and killed someone in an argument over his cell phone. That was 8 years ago, and his trial is only now getting started. The jury must soon decide whether Curtis acted in defense of himself when he shot the man inside the movie theater, or if it was blatant murder. Right now, Curtis is 79 years old. He's a senior citizen and was 71 years old at the time of the incident. It's no surprise that he was irritated when a man named Chad Olson refused to stop texting during the movie. But Chad was irritated too. He got so angry that the old man would ask him to stop texting that he ripped Curtis's popcorn out of his hand and threw it at him. In response, Curtis pulled out his gun and shot Chad in the chest. According to eyewitnesses, the last thing Chad said was, "Man, I can't believe I got shot." Blood then started bubbling out of his mouth, and moments later, he was dead. This is a pretty controversial case. On one hand, Chad slapped the popcorn from the hands of a senior citizen and threatened him. On the other, Curtis reacted by killing him. It's now all up to the jury to decide whether Curtis is guilty of murder, or if firing his gun was a reasonable response. Number 1. The Laurier Palace Theatre Fire. In Montreal, Quebec, disaster struck at a theater in 1927. It wasn't a movie theater, but an actual theater, hosting the performance of the comedy Get 'Em Young. There were 250 children in attendance, most of them not even accompanied by an adult. Somebody didn't put their cigarette out properly. It caused a fire, and 78 people died trying to scramble out of the theater as flames climbed up the walls. It was absolute pandemonium. According to what was said by survivors of the incident, somebody cried fire. The people in attendance saw there was smoke in the air, and people rushed to the exits. But there were some major mistakes made in the first few seconds. The ushers didn't realize what was happening and blocked the east balcony exit, urging the children to get back to their seats. Because the main exit door opened inwards, everyone trying to run away piled against them and prevented the doors from opening. They were like a bunch of zombies piled against the doors, with nobody able to open the doors to let them out. There were 2 people who came away as heroes. Emile Massacotti managed to save the lives of 30 children by hurrying them away from the locked exit to the projection booth and passing them out of a window. At the other stairway that wasn't blocked, a man named Paul Champagne was busy hurrying kids out to safety. He managed to get at least 100 children out of the burning theater. When the day was over, 78 children were dead. It was terrible. 12 children had been crushed to death. 2 were burned alive, and 64 died from smoke asphyxiation.
Number 9. German Poker Tournament Robbery. This incident that took place in Germany sounds like it is straight out of a heist movie. In 2010, a band of young robbers chose to rob a poker tournament in Germany. However, they were unaware that the tournament was being televised, and thousands of viewers witnessed the crime. 4 men, aged between 19 and 21, stormed into the Berlin hotel hosting the event in broad daylight. What ensued was panic-stricken screams from the participants and total chaos. At about 2 p.m., the masked men attacked the tournament area of the hotel. They threatened the cash desk staff and grabbed whatever money they can find. The poker tournament was the largest of its kind ever held in Germany, and the prize money was said to have been of €1 million. The final rounds of the event were being televised live, and the news instantly spread like wildfire. One of the robbers was pinned down by a security guard, but he somehow managed to escape. There were rumors inside the hotel that men came armed with grenades and machetes, which further fired up an already panicked crowd. The robbers fled with $327,000. Fortunately, people only suffered minor injuries from the scuffle, and no one was hurt by the masked men. Although they managed to grab a significant amount, the celebrations were short-lived. The mastermind of the whole robbery was caught within a few days, and the rest of the men were arrested soon after. Number 8. Impaled. When you're on live TV, sometimes things go wrong, and there's not a lot you can do to cover it. Breaking away from the script and technical difficulties are common, but what happened in this morning show in Poland is something that left the viewers in total shock. In 2016, host Maryna Rogalska had invited a magician on her morning show called Questions for Breakfast. The magician wasn't an amateur. They had invited Marcin Polonowicz, who was a semi-finalist on Poland's Got Talent. The segment was going quite well when Marcin asked the host to take part in the next trick. Maryna readily and quite excitedly agreed to it. In the trick, she had to slam her hand on a brown paper bag, avoiding the one with a nail sticking upwards. Marcin must have clearly got mixed up in his head. Maryna screamed in pain as the nail struck her palm. For a brief moment, the magician couldn't believe what had happened. He thought Maryna was joking, but then he noticed the nail sticking out of her hand. More like through her hand. She was immediately taken to the hospital. The channel released a statement saying Maryna was fine and her wounds were superficial. Maryna also made a point to say that it wasn't Marcin's fault. They had already practiced the trick once before going live, but the bags got mixed up during the shoot. Maryna probably won't try any more stunts like that again on her show. Number 7. Ex-broadcaster. It was just another day for TV 24-year-old journalist Allison Parker, who was on field with camera person Adam Ward. The two journalists from WDBJ from Roanoke, Virginia, were assigned to interview Vicki Gardner, the executive director of one of the local chambers of commerce, on August 26, 2015. Alice was in the middle of the live interview when the most unexpected thing happened. The crew was attacked by a gunman. At 6:46 a.m., gunshots were heard and Adam's camera fell to the ground. For a brief moment, the camera captured the gunman holding a Glock 9mm pistol. Amid the screams and panic at the scene, Allison and Adam died on the scene, while Vicki survived the injuries. The identity of the gunman came as a shocking revelation in the case. The 41-year-old man who brutally attacked them was identified as Vester Lee Flanagan II, who was a former employee of the same news channel. He had been fired a couple of years ago after a few employees complained about his odd behavior. After Flanagan was identified as the shooter, a manhunt ensued for 5 long hours. At the end of the chase, he shot himself before the cops could arrest him. Flanagan was hired at WDBJ in 2012. Soon after he joined the news team, he started getting into conflicts with photographers and other reporters. There are written reports at the office of employees feeling threatened by his strangeness. A year later, he was fired for his volatile nature. He lashed out in the newsroom and had to be escorted out by security. Flanagan was holding a grudge against Allison and Adam. According to his social media posts and personal notes, the two late journalists had allegedly made racist remarks against him and complained about him. 2 hours after the crime, he sent a 23-page fax to ABC News titled, "Suicide Note for Friends and Family," where he wrote that he was subjected to discrimination for being a homosexual black man. Number 6. Balloon Boy Hoax. How far would you go to get some fame? From the hoaxes and antics people have been pulling off lately, what this family did might not come as a surprise. On October 15, 2019, the police in Fort Collins, Colorado received a call from Richard Heen and his wife. Their 6-year-old son Falcon was trapped inside a flying saucer-shaped gas balloon. The couple said that they made the balloon and that the kid accidentally got trapped inside the plywood box attached to it. Immediately, the National Guard and local police set out on a chase to bring Falcon back safely. The balloon had already covered 50 miles within an hour and had reached a height of 7,000 feet. It finally landed 12 miles away from Denver International Airport. But here's what makes the incident strange. The child wasn't found inside. Later the same day, Falcon was recovered from the Heen family's attic, where he had been hiding the whole time. The incident had caught the media's attention, and everyone wanted to know what had happened. The family was interviewed the same evening after Falcon was found. Anchor Wolf Blitzer from Larry King Live asked Falcon why he was hiding. The little one looked at his father and very innocently said, "You guys said that, we did this for the show." Falcon had no idea that he had just uncovered the carefully planned hoax drawn out by his own parents. It was one of the most sensational revelations to ever air on live TV. Do you think there should have been consequences for the parents that sent police on a wild goose chase? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 5. Eyes on the Ball. 39-year-old Shannon Stone took his son out to a Texas Rangers game in July 2011. What was meant to be a day of fun soon turned into tragedy, and the entire incident was caught on the camera that was covering the match. In the middle of the second inning, Rangers all-star outfielder Josh Hamilton threw a ball that went flying into the stands, straight towards where Shannon and his son were seated. Shannon obviously wanted to play hero for his son and put his firefighter skills to the test. Shannon lunged to catch the ball and reached over the railing, but while doing so, he lost his balance. He fell 20 feet, landing head first. He had crashed onto the concrete floor behind the stadium scoreboard. The entire fall was caught on camera. Even the fans at home had seen the unfortunate accident. When the incident happened, no one thought it would cost a life. Even the commentators had chuckled at Shannon's attempt at catching the ball. Brad Ziegler, a pitcher from the Oakland team, told reporters that Shannon was immediately put on a stretcher. Stone was worried for his son and asked a first responder to check on him, who was up there alone. Those turned out to be his last words. He had suffered from some serious internal injuries from the fall. People who saw Shannon said that he was conscious and talking. He was even swinging his arms, so no one expected how serious the internal injuries really were. Shannon didn't even reach the hospital. He went into cardiac arrest and died in transit. So the next time you're having a fun time watching the game from the stands, don't lean over any railings to catch a fly ball. It's not that important. Better safe than sorry. Number 4. Cooking with Chef. The camera captures everything, and this chef in a Slovakian TV show learned it the hard way. Back in January 2016, during a live morning show called Telerain, the camera was focusing on the host and the guest who was busy talking. It was just like any other normal morning show, but a quick pan towards the kitchen changed everything. As the camera moves to the kitchen, it shows the 36-year-old TV chef, Lubomir Herko, using a credit card to form lines with a white powder on the counter. The clip also shows a rolled-up blank note next to it. As Herko noticed the camera, he immediately drops down the card and looks up with a nervous smile. The clip was broadcast live, and this absurd shot went viral soon after. Police immediately contacted the channel to start an investigation into the matter. However, according to a statement by the broadcaster, the white substance used by Herko wasn't a drug. In fact, it was a joke they had planned for the segment. Chef Herko, in an interview, said that he was apologetic about the whole incident. The white substance in the clip was actually powdered sugar, which he had spilled earlier. Or was it? Number 3. Haunted Doll. Debbie Merrick and her husband chanced upon a set of vintage dolls at a secondhand shop. Debbie wasn't a collector. She didn't even like dolls, but when she heard the dolls were selling for so cheap, she thought that maybe she could resell these and pocket a profit from them. Like, who doesn't like making a few extra bucks? Debbie had no clue what would happen next. The couple had stored one of the dolls under their bed, while the other two were locked away in drawers. The next morning, when the couple woke up, her husband noticed at least a dozen scratches on his knees. It was enough to send a chill down their spine. The doll had started giving them an eerie feeling, so Debbie decided it was time to put it away. She stored the vintage doll in a storage box stacked below a couple other things in her shed. That's when the second shock came. When she went to the shed again, the doll's pearl necklace was hanging from the edge of the box. The couple was featured on ITV's This Morning in 2017 while the alleged paranormal activities were happening in their home. The doll was placed next to them in a rocking chair. We can't really tell if the doll was really haunted or not, but midway through the interview, the chair started moving on its own. Was it a gimmick, or did the doll really possess supernatural powers? Number 2. Mysterious Milwaukee. We have heard of UFOs and alien hoaxes, but what these newscasters caught in the Milwaukee sky was truly baffling. In 2018, Fox 6 News stumbled upon some alien lights in their broadcast sky view. The confusion was clear in the reporters' voices when they discussed among themselves trying to figure out what the lights were. At first glance, it appeared like fireworks, but here's where things got weird. Fireworks disappear after a few seconds, but these lights remained. In fact, the lights seemed to flow in different formations in the sky. After the live telecast of the scene, many people online tried to figure out what the lights were. Were we finally making contact with an extraterrestrial species, or was it an optical illusion? The reality was much less sensational. When local reporters went to the spot to check out what these alien lights really were, they found out those specks in the sky weren't even lights in the first place. Those were seagulls. What? But how? Due to the camera's shutter speed, the outline of the birds was blurred, making it difficult for anyone to identify them. After the revelation, a video from the ground was released which proved that the lights were in fact seagulls. Sorry to disappoint the alien enthusiasts out there. And number 1, Big Brother. Justin Sebic was our participant in Big Brother Season 2, and his behavior on the show earned him an infamous status. Though Big Brother doesn't necessarily count as live television, his actions were still caught on camera. Sebic's misdemeanors led the producers to expel him from the show. No, we are not talking about being nominated out or being voted out. The guy was thrown out of the show. We all know reality TV thrives on drama, but Sebic went too far, even by those standards. Sebic had been known for his violent outbursts throughout the season. He would often threaten the other house guests and frequently deface the property, but things took a nasty turn during a drunken conversation with another house guest named Krista Stegall. Krista and Sebek were making out in the kitchen when he took a shovel and pretended to bash her head with it. So what? It was a joke, right? Well, what happened next was even more shocking. He put the shovel down and picked up a knife from the kitchen drawer. The two were making out when Sebek took the knife and held it to her throat. He asked her a hypothetical question on what would happen if he killed her. Krista was completely unfazed by the knife, but Sebek's behavior was unacceptable. He could have harmed her pretty bad. Soon after the incident, he was kicked off the show. But he is not the only one who was expelled from the show. Over the course of 22 odd seasons of Big Brother, he is one among 4 house guests to be expelled from the house on the grounds of violence or damage to the property. After all, no matter what, there is a limit to how wild things can get.
10. The murderer Alec Baldwin. While on set filming the movie Rust, Alec Baldwin shot and killed Halyna Hutchins. The gun was in his hand, and he was the one who pulled the trigger. And technically, that makes Alec Baldwin a murderer. It may have been an accident, but he is still the one who fired the shot that killed the young cinematographer. It happened at the Bonanza Creek Ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Alec Baldwin was rehearsing a scene in which his character took his gun from his holster and pointed it at the camera. Behind the camera was operator Reed Russell. But behind the monitor, just 2 feet from the muzzle of the gun, was Halyna Hutchins and Joel Souza, the director. Nobody was wearing any protective gear because nobody thought the gun would have a bullet in it. But it did. When Alec removed the weapon from the holster, the gun fired a single time. The projectile struck Halyna in the chest and hit Joel in the shoulder. Halyna was immediately flown by helicopter to the University of New Mexico Hospital, where she was promptly pronounced dead. The director was also taken to the hospital, but he was released the following morning with nothing more than a flesh wound. How could this have possibly happened? That's the big question everyone is still asking. The firearm was checked by the on-site armorer, Gutierrez Reed, before it was handed to Alec Baldwin. It was supposed to have been loaded with 4 rounds, all of them being blanks, but somehow a live round snuck into the drum. So when Alec took it from the holster and pulled the trigger, the round that got fired off was real. Police are still investigating the matter and trying to figure out how a live round made it into a prop gun and killed someone. 9. Wallace Reed. Wallace Reed was a major leading actor in the 1910s and the early 1920s. Back then, he starred in silent films. He also was one of the first major Hollywood stars to die from a drug addiction. While this kind of thing may not be that surprising now, his death in the early 20s shocked the world. And it all came about because of a wild accident that took place on a film set. Wallace Reed was filming Valley of the Giants in 1919. When he was en route to the filming location in Oregon, Wallace's train derailed while crossing a bridge. Wallace, along with the rest of the cast and crew, got into a literal train accident. Wallace ended up with a huge gash on his scalp and a piece of broken glass embedded in his arm, all the way to the bone. And because they were in such a remote location, it took over 12 hours for help to arrive. In the meantime, the studio director had a doctor administer a dose of morphine so that Wallace could shoot scenes in the movie anyway, despite his severe pain. But that one shot of morphine propelled him straight into drug addiction. Even though Wallace put out over 24 films through the next few years of his life, his addiction kept getting worse and worse. In October of 1922, on the very first day of shooting his new movie Nobody's Money, he collapsed. He bumped into a chair, fell on the floor, and began to cry. Wallace ended up being sent to a sanitarium, locked in a padded room, and within 3 months had died from influenza. 8. Top Gun pilot tragedy. During filming of the 1986 hit movie Top Gun, a man died. It happened on September 16, 1985. Art Scholl was a Wisconsin-born pilot, a talented and experienced pilot who had worked on hundreds of TV shows and movies before, including other blockbuster hits like Indiana Jones. It was a normal day for Art on the 16th. He was supposed to be doing some plate shots for the movie, meaning an inverted flat spin. It was actually a pretty standard move for any experienced pilot with almost no risk. And yet, as he was attempting the stunt at San Bernardino at the Edwards Air Force Base near Los Angeles, something went horribly wrong. The plane was supposed to spin over the water, easy enough. But the observer plane, meaning the airplane following behind Art to film his stunt, was a little too close. He radioed for them to back off and give him space. Otherwise, they would ruin the shot by being too close. But the observer airplane lost track of Art. Then suddenly he radioed saying that he had a problem. About 3 seconds later, he radioed again saying, "I have a real problem." But by the time the guys in the observer plane reached where Art should have been, he was gone. All they found was some debris floating on the water in a small patch of oil. Neither Art nor his airplane were ever seen again. 7. John Wayne and nuclear fallout. John Wayne played Genghis Khan in the movie The Conqueror back in 1954. Filming took place in the Utah desert. It took place downwind from the Nevada National Security Site, an above-ground nuclear test site where nuclear bombs were set off from between January 1951 and August 1963. There were at least 100 atmospheric nuclear tests conducted here, although only 11 had been completed by the time filming for The Conqueror started. What nobody knew back then was that nuclear fallout carried on the wind could have some seriously negative implications for anyone exposed to it. According to University of Utah professor Dr. Robert Pendleton, the fallout was abundant for over a year after some of the bigger bombs were dropped, with isotopes like strontium-90 and cesium-137 being present in the air and the soil. Specifically, these isotopes were concentrated in canyons. The movie's filming took place primarily in Snow Canyon. Unbeknownst to the actors and crew, they were all exposed to massive amounts of radiation. Within just a few years of filming, the cast and crew began to report unusual medical ailments. The director of the movie, Dick Powell, died in 1963 of lymphatic cancer. Another member of the staff suffered from skin and breast cancer and died in 1974. That same year, another woman from the set died of cancer. In the years that followed, pretty much everyone involved in the shooting died of cancer, including John Wayne in 1979. While it's never been technically proven, experts are pretty sure that filming in Snow Canyon, in one of the most radiated places in America, caused nearly everyone on the movie set to get sick and die. How do you feel knowing John Wayne could have died because of nuclear tests carried out by the government? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. 6. The Deathly Hallows. What most people don't know about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is that a man lost the use of his legs making it. His name was David Holmes, and he had been the stunt double for Daniel Radcliffe on every Harry Potter film. But as they were making the Deathly Hallows, a rehearsal accident left David paralyzed from the waist down, just 25 years old and stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The stunt was an explosion. David was to be thrown by the explosion against a wall, where he would fall on a crash pad. But he hit that wall so hard that his spine was damaged. As he lay on the crash pad, he complained to the crew that he couldn't feel his legs. When they got to the hospital, doctors realized that David would never make a full recovery. But in this case, things weren't all bad. David was able to recover mentally and continues a lifestyle of thrills and excitement to this very day. In fact, he now races modified cars at speeds of over 150 miles per hour. 5. Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee is perhaps the most infamous man to have ever died while filming a movie. On March 31, 1993, Brandon Lee, yes, the son of Bruce Lee, was shot to death while filming The Crow. It came just 20 years after his father died on July 20, 1973, at the young age of 32 in Hong Kong. The martial arts expert died from a brain edema, meaning he had too much fluid in his brain. Just like his father, Brandon Lee went on to become a movie star. He debuted his acting talents at the age of 21, starring in a Hong Kong action movie in 1986. He then made his American acting debut with Dolph Lundgren in the movie Showdown in Little Tokyo in 1991. He took on the lead role of Eric Draven in the cult classic The Crow in 1993, but he never finished filming that movie. It was about midnight on March 31st, with the cast and crew busy filming on scene at Carol Cove Studios in North Carolina. Brandon Lee entered a room. Another actor shot him from a distance of about 15 feet, and a .44 caliber slug entered Brandon's abdomen and lodged in his spine. The wound was fatal, with Brandon dying just hours later in the hospital from internal injuries, blood loss, and heart failure. The gun was supposed to be filled with blanks. There were a lot of rumors surrounding his death at the time, but an investigation proved it wasn't that mysterious. Dummy cartridges that had been used for filming the gun being loaded were supposed to be removed and replaced with blanks, but they never were, and when the gun was fired, a very real bullet killed the actor. 4. Crushed to death. David Ritchie was 56 years old when he was killed on the set of the movie Jumper back in 2007. The filming had actually already wrapped up. David was one of the workers dismantling the set in Toronto, Canada. But as he and 3 other workers were sorting through debris, a huge chunk of frozen sand and gravel broke off a wall and fell on 2 of the workers. David was literally crushed to death, while one of his co-workers suffered serious injuries. In this case, the production company was fined for the death, having to pay over $250,000 in damages. One of the biggest issues was that none of the workers were wearing protective equipment. David didn't even have a helmet on, which could have saved his life. Then again, it was a pretty big piece of debris that fell on him. 3. The Twilight Zone. On July 23, 1982, a man named Vic Morrow and a pair of child actors were killed in a devastating helicopter accident while filming Twilight Zone, the movie. Vic was 53, but the kids, Renee Shin Chen and Micah Dean Lee, were just 6 and 7. They were shooting a Vietnam War battle scene with a helicopter chasing the 3 of them across a battlefield. Special effects explosions caused the scene to go sideways. The pilot of the helicopter lost control and crashed into the people he was fake chasing, killing all 3. It was a total disaster, especially since the accident happened on the very last day of scheduled shooting. The co-director, along with 4 other men working on the film, got charged with involuntary manslaughter. According to the New York Times, it was the first time that a film director ever faced criminal charges for something that happened by accident while making a movie. And while their lawyers argued that the director, the pilot, and the special effects coordinator couldn't have possibly predicted what would happen, they still got in major trouble. The prosecution accused the director and his crew of being reckless and of violating laws involving child actors. In the end, the trial took 10 months. All 5 defendants were acquitted, and Steven Spielberg, the producer of the movie, settled lawsuits put forth by the victims' families for an undisclosed amount of money. 2. An Evil Amputation. During the shooting of Resident Evil, the final chapter, South African stuntwoman Olivia Jackson lost her arm. The shooting was in Cape Town, with Olivia being the stunt double for action star Mila Jovovich. The scene was pretty simple. It had Jovovich driving a motorcycle at very high speed directly at the camera. But of course, it was actually Olivia driving the motorcycle. What should have been a simple scene turned into a life-changing day for Olivia when she collided with a crane-mounted camera vehicle. She hit the vehicle so hard that she was knocked into a coma for 17 days. And while she was unconscious, she had to have her left arm amputated above the elbow. One second she was driving a motorcycle, the next she was waking up in a hospital bed 2 weeks later without one of her arms. 1. Gone in 60 seconds. In August of 1989, director, actor, and producer Tony Halicki died in a stunt gone wrong while trying to shoot the sequel to Gone in 60 Seconds. Toby had made a pretty big name for himself in Hollywood for directing and producing some of the most intense car crash movies in the 1980s. Gone in 60 Seconds 2 was supposed to be bigger and badder than the first one, but it was this drive for big explosions and big thrills that ultimately led to Toby's death. For months, Toby had been arguing with local officials in the small town of Tonawanda, just outside Buffalo. He wanted to topple a huge water tower for a stunt. The water tower was 141 feet tall and located inside a creepy, abandoned industrial park. He was finally given permission once he obtained $8 million in insurance. But when it was time for the water tower to come down, it fell prematurely during the preparations. The 48-year-old director was underneath the tower when the whole thing came down. But the water tower itself didn't fall on Toby. It was actually a telephone pole. A cable attached to the tower snapped as it fell, slapped the telephone pole, and that fell directly on the director, crushing him to death. They did manage to get him to the hospital, but he died there of internal injuries. The movie was never finished. Thanks for watching. What do you think was the worst film set accident of all time? Let us know about it in the comments, and remember to hit subscribe if you liked what you saw, and come back again for more great stuff. See you next time. Bye.